Stan Lee, one of the co-founders of Marvel Comics, is also infamous for allegedly destroying power scaling in 90 seconds. But is that what he was trying to do? Or was this just a clip that someone took and imposed a super misleading title onto it to gaslighting you into thinking that? Well, that's what we plan on addressing today. So with that being said, let's get into it.
The question I'm always asked: who would win in a fight? Who would win in a fight if Galactus fought the Hulk? Or if Thor fought Iron Man? And there's one answer to all of that. It's so simple. Anyone should know this. The person who'd win in a fight is the person that the scriptwriter wants to win.
Now, I'm sure most of you can understand where Stan Lee is coming from when he makes this statement. Anyone who's been on Twitter has seen writers get haggled by room temperature IQ people to answer questions. But was Stan Lee right? No, he wasn't. That may come as a shock to some people, but something you have to remember is that fights are rarely just in a vacuum without any other further context. Especially in comics, when more often than not there are previous issues where characters can get stronger or weaker than they usually are, or that they are established that if they fight this person, they'll hold back. So even if we do end up writing the story where a character wins, another context can suggest that the other character, under standard battle assumptions, really should have won. This is not to mention that authors also have editors, especially for Marvel and DC, when they have whole teams of them. And if something isn't to their liking or they notice something wouldn't be consistent for DC or Marvel within its characters, they will ask the writer to change it or remove it. Even with scriptwriters for TV shows or movies, have a whole team of themselves along with other positions that are all collectively responsible and contribute to what makes up the final product. It's not like it's always up to one guy for what gets to be written into a story. A popular example of this is with Doomsday. Dan Jurgens and the other Superman writers at the time could have easily had Darkseid kill Superman. But what did they say? Well, Superman has beaten Darkseid too often, so Darkseid is too weak, and thus they created Doomsday. And that's not even going into giving off the story to another company or someone else taking over as the new author of the series. But regardless, everyone just assumes that this line in itself could be used to dismiss any power scaling opinion or take ever, while not understanding what power scaling really is and why these conversations are more beneficial to occur than for them to not occur. So what is power scaling? Power scaling is a form of narrative analysis where we take what's presented to us from the story so that we can try our best to answer the question: if we take these two characters and had them fight, who would more than likely win? You don't have to participate in these conversations or even like them, but I think it's incredibly ignorant and disingenuous to act like it's some kind of moral high ground or enlightened stance to say that power scaling is dumb or cringe. Then cite Stan Lee saying it ultimately depends on the scriptwriter, as if that debunks power scaling as a concept or even renders it useless as a form of narrative analysis. It's like calling any narrative-based video going over character analysis of someone else's story and saying, well, you aren't the author, so this video is invalid. You're more or less telling people to stop talking about the story because they're not allowed to, just because there's nothing legally binding them to be a part of the story's creation, which is just silly. Now, despite people being so opposed to power scaling, it's often ironic that those same people will often participate in conversations like it without even knowing, saying stuff like, well, if this sports team beats this other one, they'll likely win the next game. Or if they often hear a story about this great big bear, subconsciously they're likely thinking whether or not they could have beaten that bear in a fight. Fundamentally, this is the same as power scaling, because you're hearing a series of events and using it to inform a predictive model of the future, which is exactly what we're doing when we're power scaling characters in fiction. The only real difference between the two is one is fictitious and one isn't. You don't have to like these types of discussions or even engage with them, but it doesn't matter because it's ultimately up to the author, when the same line of logic can be used for any conversation in regards to real life phenomena. It's, again, incredibly silly. Like, imagine going up to a combat sports crowd and saying, well, we don't know if Conor McGregor can solve the UFC, it's all up to the judges anyway. What you end up doing is interjecting, saying nothing of substance, while acting like what you just said is some big revelation that no one has ever considered. It's incredibly rude and ignorant to make comments like this, especially when you think that what you're saying at all matters or that you're bringing some type of valuable information. But what that tells everyone is that you're making a declaration of you coping from your own ignorance. Because realistically, no one who is educated or trying to have an educated opinion makes these types of comments. But then, why would Stan Lee make such an ignorant comment when he knows better? Well, let's hear what he has to say.
If I'm writing a story about the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and he gets into a big fight with Spider-Man, and millions of people out there say, who would win? Well, it depends on who I want to win if I'm writing the script. If I want Spider-Man to win, he'll win. If I want the Thing to win, he'll win. These are fictitious characters. The writer can do whatever he wants with them. So stop asking those bonehead questions, because I've had it with that.
So now we understand the reason behind the madness. Truthfully, the main reason Stan Lee made this rant of comment is because he's fed up with people asking him his opinions about who wins between his characters. And I have a few speculative reasons as to why this would legit bother someone. Well, the simplest one is not everyone likes being asked the same question over and over again, especially if they notice a trend when that happens. So Stan Lee probably decided to say this out of hope people would just be satisfied with that as an answer from him, and hopefully stop asking. Well, unfortunately, no one has told him what the Streisand effect was. However, I believe he's also irritated for the same reason that I and many others have when it comes to citing people like him as a source. It's essentially the laziest conclusion you can come to about the story, since you're ultimately conceding to reading and or interpreting the story for yourself, and are now instead relying upon and are asking the author to interpret it for you, like asking your parents to read you a bedtime story, then asking them what happened after the fact. Now, an author's giving their own interpretation of their own work is fine, but a problem erupts the moment you say his or her version becomes the definitive and true way to read the story. Even some creators, like the ones for Rick and Morty, are aware of this problem and avoid giving away these quote-unquote definitive answers because then people will think that the conversation is now over. Interpretation dies the moment the author's word becomes law, which is what Roland Barthes tells us in The Death of the Author. Now, I have reiterated many times on my channel about this philosophical concept before, as well as the many issues that arise from accepting author statements. But hopefully this video has clarified that Stan Lee didn't quote-unquote debunk power scaling, but that he said what he says here to get people off his back about questions you can easily answer yourself by reading the comics. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, but until the next one, thank you all for watching, and class is dismissed.